Hello, it's time for your latest Met Office deep dive. I'm Alex Burkill. Welcome along, especially if you are watching this as we premiere it on YouTube. And if so, do leave some comments, use the chat as I will be able to reply to them in real time as I'll be watching along and also be able to answer the comments for a few minutes after it's finished as well. But if you're watching this later, do also leave some comments as well because I will be able to reply to those later too. And if you've enjoyed everything that I've been through today, then do hit the like button, share it with anyone who you think might be interested. If this is your first deep dive, then I will be talking for the next 20 minutes or so about the weather, what's happened and what's going to happen as we go through the next few days. Starting off then, looking at what is going to happen as we go through the rest of this week. And first of all, I wanted to show you the jet stream, that ribbon of fast-moving air higher up in the atmosphere that really does influence our weather. At the moment, it's a fairly active jet, but it's keeping just to the north of the UK. This is the bigger picture from this afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, but there is a deep area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic, and this is heavily influenced by the jet stream as we go through the next 24 hours or so. If I run this through, and that low pressure actually crosses from one side to the colder northern side of the jet stream as it pushes its way towards the UK. If I stop this here then at 6 o'clock on Wednesday morning, and the process of that low pressure moving to that colder northern side of the jet stream means it is likely to deepen very rapidly. It's likely to go through something called explosive cyclogenesis. So we are going to end up with a very deep area of low pressure. Fortunately for the UK, however, it is likely to stay quite a bit to the north of the UK. And so whilst it is going to bring some very strong winds to the UK, they don't look like they'll be as impactful as the winds that we saw in association with Storm Isha and Storm Jocelyn that we had quite recently. If I show you that in a different way then, if I get my drawing tool out, I do have to be careful with this. Last time I used the drawing tool, I drew something I shouldn't have. But if I first of all put the lines on of a rough track that Storm Jocelyn and Isha took, and they went something similar to this. Don't take the position of these two literally, but roughly that's the rough track that they took. However, if instead now I draw this feature, the low that's coming through as we go into Wednesday, and this one's likely to take a slightly more northern track. That's not quite right, but it's close enough. But what you can see is, although it is likely to be a very deep area of low pressure because it goes through that explosive cyclogenesis, because it's not especially close to the UK, it's not as close as the features that we had recently, it's less likely to bring the extreme impactful winds, at least to the UK. It is still going to be very windy, I'll show you that in a second, but this feature has actually been named, not by us, but by the Norwegian Met Service. They've named it Storm Ingunn because it is likely to bring the most impactful weather to Norway. In terms of the winds that we can expect in the UK then, and if I show you our gust field for the coming picture as we go through Tuesday night and into Wednesday, and you can see some very strong gusts, particularly across northern parts of the UK, northern Scotland especially having some very strong gusts. We're talking gusts 80 to 85 miles per hour, look quite possible as we go through, oh, it skipped over a bit then, apologies. As we go through Wednesday, particularly during the middle part of the day, that looks like when it's going to be at its strongest. And even further south across parts of Northern Ireland into southern Scotland, northern England, there will be some strong winds here. But across southern areas, yes, it is going to be a blustery, windy day, but nothing particularly impactful. It's really across northern areas that we're going to see the greatest chance of impacts in association with the winds. And that's covered if we look at our wind warnings that we have out. So starting off, and currently at time of recording, we have this area of northern Scotland, which is covered by a wind warning, talking of gusts of 80, possibly up to 85 miles per hour, so very strong winds indeed. But obviously this part of the country is more able to cope with this strength of wind. That being said, it is likely to cause some impacts in places. And then we have another yellow wind warning which covers a slightly broader area across the rest of Scotland into northern England and parts of Northern Ireland where we could see gusts of 60 to 65 miles per hour. But like I said, yes, it is a deep area of low pressure, but because of its proximity or how unclose that it is to the UK compared to recent storms, it's less likely to be impactful than some of the unsettled weather we've had recently. But what's to come after that clears through? Well, if we put our rainfall on instead, and if I run through what's to come as we go through Tuesday into Wednesday. So as well as the strong winds, this feature is going to lead to a front that's going to cross the UK. If I zoom in just a little bit, and where's the zoom gone? I've lost it. Here it is. And so you can see as this front pushes its way southwards across the UK, it is likely to bring a significant amount of rain, particularly to parts of Scotland. Could see 30 to 40 millimetres perhaps. There could be some line convection on this, so could be some heavy downpours for a time. There is perhaps even some thunder mixed in with it is possible, and some snow over higher ground. And it's probably as this front's coming through that we're likely to see the really strong winds as we go through Wednesday. That front then pushes its way southwards as we go through the day. It does cross Northern Ireland, northern parts of England into Wales, and still some heavier bursts. But what you can see as it reaches southern areas, which for the most part will have a largely dry, fine day on Wednesday. The rain will arrive there later on as we go through the evening and overnight, but it really breaks up by the time it does so. So many southern areas seeing some rain later on Wednesday, but it won't be as heavy, not as impactful as it is likely to be further north. Behind the rain, if I just scroll back a little bit, and immediately behind it, we're likely to still have some very strong winds. So that's probably when we could see some of the strongest winds in association with the showery weather that's likely to follow in behind the front across parts of Scotland. And some of those showers could be heavy, could have some hail, some sleet, and even some thunder mixed in with them as well. So some fairly hazardous weather to come through as we go through Wednesday. But that front then clears away towards the south, perhaps some drizzly rain to start off with in the south on Thursday, but that then clears through. And then it's a generally dry picture across the south on Thursday before another system pushes its way in across northern areas as we go through later Thursday and more so into Friday. Then on Friday, there are, well, really the big thing that I want to draw our attention to for Friday is this area of high pressure. It's not really dominating the weather in terms of turning things too dry on Friday, because you can see quite a bit of cloudy outbreaks of drizzly rain at times, particularly across western areas. But what it is doing, two things. Tightly packed isobars, highlighting that it is going to be quite blustery, quite windy as we go through Friday, pretty much for the whole of the UK. And if I put on our temperatures, and you can see we've got some warm air across the UK. So these temperatures, the colours here show us the temperature at around 850 hectopascals. So that's around 1,500 metres up. So not at the surface, but nonetheless, we are likely to have some pretty warm or very mild air across the UK, especially across eastern parts. That's where it's likely to be mildest. And because of the direction that our air is coming from the west, it's likely to be in eastern parts where we have the greatest chance of getting any cloud breaks, any sunshine, as that's where temperatures are likely to be highest. We're looking at maximum temperatures in the mid-teens, perhaps even high teens for some places. And it's not just by day that it's going to be warm. By night, temperatures could be around 10 degrees or so above average for the time of year. So a warmer spell to come, but it doesn't last particularly long. As we go through Friday and into Saturday, we then see a front pushing its way southwards, and behind it something a little bit colder, some colder air coming at least across the northern half of the UK, with something less mild, less warm across southern areas too. And if I get rid of the temperatures and put the rainfall back on, you can see as we go through the weekend there will be some showery outbreaks of rain around at times as well. So turning a bit more unsettled again. So it's fair to say that whilst this week isn't going to be as unsettled, as stormy as it was last week or so with Isha and Jocelyn, it is likely to be a bit changeable, and there's a bit of a mixed picture in terms of what we can expect, with then that milder weather that I pointed out likely to arrive in time for Friday. But as well as I say it's going to turn milder on Friday. You may have heard it was exceptionally warm for some places over the weekend. So if I get up this chart, which showed us the maximum temperature from Sunday, and it actually reached 19.9. It reached 19.6 at Kinlochju on Sunday, and 19.9 at Uckfari, and that makes it provisionally a new UK record maximum temperature for January, beating the previous record of 18.3. So that's quite a jump, going from 18.3 to 19.9. It's exceeded that record by more than a degree. Interestingly, about the 18.3, the previous record, it was actually reached in January on 4 occasions. Twice at Aber in Wales, and then two other places in 2003. So, well, I mean, that's history now, because that was an interesting fact that we had that on 4 occasions for January, that 18.3, but now that 19.9 looks likely to be the new UK record maximum temperature for January. It is provisional, and it's worth bearing in mind that Uckfari is a manual site, so it does need some quality checking, but there's no reason for us to think that it won't be counted as being legitimate, and so it is likely to be the new record temperature. But I want to take a deeper look at what happened at Kinlochju for a second, and you'll see why. Because Kinlochju isn't a manual site, we have a bit more temperature data about it. And so here we are able to plot our charts. And what we have here are is the air temperature chart, or the air temperature line is this orange line at the top, and it shows the air temperature, as you would expect. And then the bottom line, the bluey-greeny line, turquoisey line, that is our dew point. Remember, dew point is the temperature at which the air needs to be cooled down to at equal pressure in order for all the moisture in the air to be condensed out, for it to reach 100% humidity. The difference between the air temperature and the dew point, that is called our dew point depression. And the greater the dew point depression, so the greater the difference between these two lines, the drier the air is. That's what we need to remember. So unfortunately, we can't quite see the time on the bottom because my buttons have got in the way, but as we went through the morning, it was, there was nothing particularly abnormal at that point. But as we got to about, I think it was around 11 o'clock in the morning, we had this drier slice of air. You could see the air temperature suddenly rose quite sharply, and the dew point dropped quite sharply as well. And that was because we had this drier slice of air that was coming in. With that then, you can see temperatures really rose as we went through the morning and into the lunchtime period, and that's when at Kinlochju they peaked around 19.6, and in fact we reached 19.6 at Kinlochju on a few occasions through that little period of the day. So it wasn't just one little peak, it actually happened a couple of times, and so it was a very warm spell. Temperatures then did gradually drop, and you can see actually as we went through towards the evening there was a slice of cloudier weather that came through, and so you can see the humidity increased. You can see our temperature and our dew point line get much closer together because of the humidity dropping, and then temperatures continued to drop as we went through the day and through the night. In fact, temperatures at Kinlochju did actually dip a little bit below freezing. So they went from close to 20 Celsius to just below freezing. That's quite a large diurnal range. But what caused this? Well, let's start off taking a look at where our air was coming from, because that is a big cause of the warmth. This is the analysis chart from midnight on Sunday. And what you can see, the UK's in the middle of the chart, and the isobars show where the air is coming from. Remember, the air runs parallel to the isobars, so it's coming from the south-southwest. And in that air, we're then dragging that in from a warm direction. And what is interesting with this chart is if you follow the isobars back, you go off the chart in order to find the source of the air, where it's actually coming from. So it's coming from much further south. So it's no wonder that we had such warm air across the UK, which is why those temperatures were quite high. The other thing to bear in mind is the fact that these isobars, again, tightly packed together. And so it was a brisk flow coming up towards the UK, which would have stopped the air from mixing too much. And so around the 900, 850 hectopascal layer where this air would have been travelling up from, it wouldn't have been mixed up as much as it normally would have been because it was moving so quickly towards the UK. And so we really had that warm plume of air that was coming towards us. And then there was something called the Foehn effect. I'll just go back to this chart. Whilst I explain the Foehn effect, so you've probably heard us talk about this before, but in case you're not aware, the Foehn effect is when you end up with much drier, warmer air on the leeward side of any higher ground, so on the side opposite side to where the wind's coming from. And this happens because a parcel of air has lots of moisture in it, and it hits the elevated terrain, so the hills, the mountains, and that then forces it to rise up. As it rises up, it does a couple of things. It cools down because the pressure decreases as it goes up, and as it cools down, cooler air can hold less moisture, and so the water condenses out. You get clouds, you can get rain or snow. That's why it's often cloudier over the hills and the mountains. This process of the water condensing out actually leads to a bit of heating, and so the parcel of air then actually starts to warm up a bit more. And on the other side of the mountain, as the air's pushed it over, that warm air is now drier because we've seen because the water is condensed out, and it's warmer. Then as it goes down the other side of the mountain, in the same way that the rising up the mountain led to the air cooling down, it's the opposite, the other side. As the air drops down the other side of the mountain, the pressure increases, and so it actually warms up even further, and so that's when you can get more warm air. On top of that, in this occasion, we had that plume of warmer air that I just showed you coming from so far to the south of us. That air was dragged down, so it was very warm air anyway that it was dragging down. And it was really dry air, likely to be less clouds, so a bit more heating from the sun. And so all of that means that we had such exceptionally high temperatures in some parts of the UK, well, parts of Scotland, as we went through on Sunday. So that's why temperatures reached close to 20 Celsius, exceptionally warm. Not as warm as it was in parts of Spain last week. On Thursday, temperatures in Gavada in the Valencia community of Spain reached 30.7. That is a new record temperature. So the highest temperature on record for anywhere in Europe in January. So exceptionally warm. So we weren't quite as warm as that. And in fact, it's worth bearing in mind with that Spanish temperature, that makes it 4 consecutive months for Spain now where they've had their national maximum temperature record. So it has been very warm for them on many occasions recently as we've gone through the end of autumn and through much of winter so far. So I hope that explains a little bit as to why it got so warm across parts of Scotland. So just to reiterate, Akfari got to 19.9. That's our new, likely to be, once it's been verified, our new UK maximum temperature record for January. That southerly flow then that I mentioned with the pressure chart did another thing as well. You may have noticed over the last few days we've had some pretty stunning sunrises and sunsets. Here's a sunset from Monday from Graham Fraser in Stirling in Scotland, and you can see those beautiful red colours. Now you'll probably know the saying, red sky at night, shepherd's or sailor's delight, red sky at morning, shepherd's warning. And so the sunset that we had on Monday was in association with the fact that we had higher pressure that was coming in from the west as we went into today. And that's why as we went through today, many places turned largely dry and there was increasing amounts of sunshine. So in this case, the saying worked out. Yes, there was some fine weather to come. However, the other reason for the fact that we had such spectacular images with such deep red colours recently is because of Saharan dust. So this is a satellite image taken from Copernicus. This was on Thursday, the 25th of January, so the same day, in fact, that Spain was reaching that 30.7 Celsius. And you can see the lifted dust that had been lifted up from the Sahara, and this dust was then dragged in on that southerly flow that I've already talked about towards the UK, and it's this that then led to dust particles in the atmosphere, and it's the way that these dust particles react, or the light reacts with these dust particles, that leads to these spectacular colours that some of us saw. You may have noticed as well, I did, that there may have been some dusty deposits on your cars or any windows. My car was especially dirty this morning when I looked at it before heading into work. So I think that's all that I wanted to cover about what's happened. The next thing that I wanted to look at is looking ahead a bit further on. So I've talked about what's going to happen as we go through the next few days towards the end of the week, likely to turn pretty mild, could be fairly warm even, with temperatures in the mid to high teens across some parts, eastern areas in particular, as we go through into Friday. But what happens thereafter? And I think as we go through next week, so the week beginning Monday the 5th of February, we could start off with high pressure somewhere towards the south of the UK, and that will allow for, like we've seen recently, a westerly flow coming in, or a south-southwesterly flow, and that will keep some mild air across the UK at least to begin with, and so temperatures will be around or a little bit above average for the time of year. More unsettled weather is then likely to come in as we go through next week, some deep areas of low pressure, but it is likely to stay temperature-wise milder than average for the time of year. This chart behind me shows the ECMWF anomaly plot for temperatures, and they show that it's likely to be warmer than average as we go through next week. But as we go deeper into February, and if we go into the following week, so the second full week of February starting the 12th, and by then there are some signs that we could get something maybe more akin to what we had before with the colder weather, when we had higher pressure towards the west of UK, and that could allow for a northerly flow to come across the UK. And if that happens, then yeah, temperatures could start to drop. And if we then go into the next week, so the week beginning Monday the 19th of February, and it looks likely then that temperatures could be even lower still, so significantly lower than average perhaps. So it is all to play for in terms of of what's to come, but there are at this stage some signs that as we go through February, we could start to see our temperatures dropping off a bit, so some colder weather could be on the cards. Stay tuned for more information about that. If you are interested in more details about the forecast through the next, 14 days or so, I will be updating the 14-day outlook video, which is available on our app, and also Aidan will be here tomorrow with the 10-day trend, so we'll have more information, more in-depth look at what we can expect in terms of the weather forecast through the next week or so. Then, thank you for sticking with me so far. I just wanted to end because to mark our 170th anniversary, the Met Office have teamed up with Royal Mail and we have issued these stamps. I have a copy of them here. There are 8 stamps which are currently available to pre-order. I will put a link where you can pre-order them in the caption, so you will be able to have a look at them if you would like. But these stamps really cover some of the history of the Met Office, some of the big things that have played a big part in the Met Office becoming what it is. So here we have Barbara Edwards. She was the first UK female weather presenter on TV. There is Luke Howard, who's the godfather of clouds. He came up with the naming system for the clouds that we still use today. There's one of Fitzroy's barometers. There's some radars. There's some observation, or something, a stamp looking at the observations that helped with the D-Day landings, where obviously the weather forecast plays a huge important role. And it's just wonderful that we could team up with the Royal Mail to mark our 170th anniversary. So if you are interested in that, like I said, there will be a link that you can have a look, and if you'd like to, you can pre-order. Now, thank you again for joining me. I think that's everything that I wanted to cover today. Like I said, if you are watching this as we premiered it on YouTube, then I have been watching along and I'll be able to reply for a little while longer to any comments, any questions you have about anything that I've discussed today. But if you're watching this later on, don't worry, I will be reading the comments later on as well. So do leave a comment if you would like to. And as always, hit the like button, hit the share button if you have found this enjoyable and useful, and if you think there's anyone else who would also like to watch it. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining me. Hope you have a wonderful evening or the rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.